And now en français. Bonjour tout le monde. Oh, so you're all bilingual. That's perfect. Well, it's my great pleasure to see you all today for the launch of our SOWE report, the State of Women Entrepreneurship report. But first, so my name is Sabine Soumari. I'm the Executive Director of the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, and I see so many familiar faces, friends, ecosystem partners, allies, strong, successful women entrepreneurs in the room. So please clap for all of you. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm going to be very short because I want to make sure that the minister can make her remarks and then leave because she's very busy. You know, these days it's been really busy. So much happening. But before we begin, I wish to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge the traditional territories of the indigenous peoples whose presence continue to enrich our communities. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon territory is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississauga, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent indigenous nations, peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. As I said, it's now with great joy and pride that I welcome you today, virtually, here in person in the room, to the 2025 State of Women Entrepreneurship Report Launch. Just a few words about WEKH, because some of you might not know about what we do. We've been, for the past 7 years, the ears and the voice of the women entrepreneurship ecosystem. We have worked very strongly and closely with the Government of Canada, but also with our 10 regional hubs, and we have hubs representatives in the room, and also over 250 partners across the country. And I see so many faces. You are making so much impact into the ecosystem. We've been doing that for the past 7 years, but for some of you, it's been beyond that. So thank you for that. And as part of, we've published many reports. Wendy knows the numbers. Many reports that you can find on our website. We've also launched initiatives, and there is one that I want to mention, which is very key because we tend to break stereotypes around entrepreneurship. That's the goal of this initiative. It's called See It, Be It, a database of 2,000 women entrepreneurs from different backgrounds, regions, sectors, and at different stages of their businesses. And we want to see more women entrepreneurs, because if we see more women entrepreneurs, then we can inspire the others, but we can also make sure that the women entrepreneurship ecosystem is diverse and the entrepreneurship ecosystem altogether is as diverse as the women entrepreneurship one. Je tiens à réitérer que cet événement sera également, ou un événement en français, un lancement en français sera également disponible. Nous le lancerons le 19 mars de 13h à 14h30. Donc n'hésitez pas. We will be also hosting an event en français, in French, a virtual event on March 19th from 1 to 2:30. Well, right now, I would like to introduce Minister Valdez, the Minister of Small Business. Minister Valdez, the Honourable Rechie Valdez, was elected as the Member of Parliament for Mississauga, Streetsville in 2021. She has been a member of various parliamentary committees and associations, including the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs and the Canadian NATO Parliamentary Association, as well as the chair of the Canada-Philippines Parliamentary Friendship Group. Minister Valdez is a Canadian entrepreneur, television personality, and a community advocate. She's the first Filipino-Canadian woman elected as a member of parliament and appointed to cabinet, and is committed to ensuring the diverse voices of her community are heard. Before entering politics, Minister Valdez owned and operated a small business and dedicated herself to growing her online business avenues. She was also the host of a television show that shares the stories of entrepreneurs, creators, and also artists, prior to that, she worked in corporate banking for 15 years, where she developed her expertise in change management and strategic initiatives. Drawing on her long-standing advocacy, Minister Valdez also sponsored the National Women's Entrepreneurship Act in 2022, and we thank you for that, Minister. Please, Minister, come and join me here on the stage.
Well, good morning, everyone. How are we doing today? All right. I love me some femme energy. Let's try that again, because this weekend is International Women's Day. How are we doing today? Good morning to all of you in the room as well as online. Thank you so much to Wendy and to the entire WEKH team for having us. It's so good to be joined along with Sabine, Shannon, and to the entire WEKH team. I need to have them all stand up, because it's time that we take the time to acknowledge the people behind everything, the work. Yes, all the WEKH team. Yes, Wendy, that's you too. Thank you for taking the time to acknowledge them, because they're about to show you what they've been working on for quite some time. And shout out to Shannon, who's the host of the Finance Cafe podcast, which I all recommend you tune into and listen, because it's very insightful. To all of us who are present, just know that you are in such good hands with this team. So imagine all of us wake up in the morning, right? Have our coffee, go to work. You know what they do every morning? They wake up, pop out of bed, and say, how do I make the world better for women entrepreneurs? So thank you for the work that you are doing. Before we start, I want to address the American tariffs that went into effect earlier this week. These tariffs are unjustified and they are unacceptable. They will hurt Canadian businesses and Canadian consumers. We are responding firmly with $155 billion in retaliatory tariffs against the United States, which will be in place until the U.S. withdraws their tariffs, and not a second sooner. To Canadian businesses, we have your backs, and with additional supports coming to you all very soon. I know it's going to be rough, it's going to be a bumpy ride, but this is an opportunity for us to link arms and do what we do best and support each other, and most importantly, choose Canada and support Canadian businesses. Now, as I stand here today, I'm very humbled, because I can't help but reflect on my own journey as an entrepreneur. Sorry. I know, it's been an incredible journey for a year and 3 months, having the honor to be the Minister of Small Business. I mean, Sabine gave you the, like the chat GPT version. But after 15 years of corporate banking and thinking I had made it in my life, and when it all changed, thank you so much. They always know. Everyone's probably used to this by now. After 15 years of corporate banking, I had this incredible opportunity to step into the kitchen and bake my daughter Cassidy's first birthday cake, and many of you know this story. But this 2-tier pink vanilla fondant cake introduced me to who I am inside as a creative, as a passionate person. It helped me become a small business entrepreneur. And I know firsthand the challenges that we all face as entrepreneurs, especially as women entrepreneurs. And during those early days, I was juggling working full-time, working on my hustle, dropping my kids to hockey practice, grocery shopping, and then taking care of my customers and everything in between. Like so many women entrepreneurs, I wore multiple hats and faced constant questions about whether I could balance it all. My mom questioned everything that I did. And she's like, well, Rechie, why change? Why do all this? Why work harder? Why sweat it? What's the point? And what do you do it all for? So despite the long hours and the criticism and countless hurdles I faced, I kept going. I bootstrapped everything. I didn't actually know that there were options and avenues available to us. I was driven, but I was incredibly isolated. My story is not unique. It's a pattern repeated across Canada by so many women entrepreneurs who share that same drive, who are determined to see their dreams through where others see obstacles. Like many women business owners, my personal identity is layered and has many sides. I'm a daughter, a wife, a mom, a former small business entrepreneur, a Filipino Zambian Canadian, MP, and now Federal Minister of Small Business. And while each of us have identities that are different, as women, especially women of color, we share common challenges when we step into entrepreneurship. My journey taught me that success isn't a solo expedition. Without the support of my family, my husband, and my community, I'm not quite sure where I would be today. So I give my heart out to all of them. This is the reason why I'm so passionate about the ecosystem we've built together, this community that we're building together through the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub. Your tribe. Imagine you all have a safe place where you can come just as you are and bring everything you bring to the table each and every day, and you have full support. You heard Sabine say it. We have 10 regional hubs and a network of more than 250 researchers, and so much support through our organizations and incredible stakeholders. Now, many of you in this room support many other teams who are not here with us, but I want to thank you for your leadership. Thank you to your teams who may not be with us today physically, but for all that you're doing to support women entrepreneurs like myself, advance women entrepreneurship in Canada. Thank you all for your incredible support each and every day. The State of Women's Entrepreneurship 2025 report is the pulse. It demonstrates how the Knowledge Hub is transforming our understanding of entrepreneurial landscape for women. Your research illustrates the path forward, it identifies gaps, and it showcases successes that might otherwise go unnoticed. And by documenting the experiences of diverse women entrepreneurs, you're ensuring that our government policies reflect real life experiences and not just assumptions. And the reality is, while small businesses make up 98% of enterprises across Canada, less than 18% are majority owned by women. Globally, we know women-led startups only receive 2% of venture capital funding, and women entrepreneurs receive about 2.5 times less in financing. These aren't just statistics. They represent the untapped potential that we miss out on collectively. Studies show that women-led businesses are more motivated to help socially, and that investments in women's startups deliver higher revenue dollar for dollar than those founded by men. Did you hear that? We generate higher revenue, baby. But we all know that. In fact, ensuring women's full economic participation could add billions to our Canadian economy. These numbers represent dollars that pay bills, add jobs to our economy, and create next generation opportunities. And that's exactly why our government remains wholeheartedly committed to our Women Entrepreneurship Strategy. As you've heard Sabine say, since 2018, we've invested nearly $7 billion in the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, unlocking access to financing and mentorship and developing the supportive ecosystem women entrepreneurs need to succeed. And I'm proud to say that it is working. The Women Entrepreneurship Strategy has already supported over 400,000 women across this country. Wow. So far, women entrepreneurs have accessed ecosystem programs and events over 181,000 times. Women entrepreneurs have accessed financing through more than 25,000 loans. Over 160,000 women entrepreneurs have attended Knowledge Hub events just like this one today. In other words, we've kept Wendy and team very, very busy. Again, these aren't just numbers. These are women who had previously were told no when trying to access financing at a traditional bank. These are women who found the courage and inspiration to follow their dreams after attending an ecosystem or Knowledge Hub event. These are women who finally were able to find a mentor who truly cared about their success and growth. These are over 400,000 success stories, all thanks to those of you in the room today. Our government's commitment to women entrepreneurs extends beyond financing, folks, and beyond mentorship opportunity. Let's not forget the historic investments our government has made to support women in all aspects of their life. I'm talking about national early learning and childcare, so that women never have to have the difficult decision between choosing affordable childcare or their careers. The Canada Child Benefit, the Canada Dental Care Plan, and we are already seeing the benefits of record high levels of women's participation in the workforce and women that are choosing entrepreneurial dreams as their future passion. We also made parental leave more flexible, giving families the support they need during those life-changing moments. And I had a conversation with my brother the other day. He told me how grateful he was that he actually got a chance to take off time from work to be able to take care of Avery, who is now almost 2 years old. And we legislated the Pay Equity Act to ensure equal pay for equal work. This closes the gender pay gap and ensures that women are fairly compensated for their contributions. You know, when I was in corporate banking, I remember making it to like my year-end conversation. Do you remember that? Like, if any of you experienced it, it's this dreadful moment in time where someone is going to dictate my future. And I had to come in there, pitch what I did the entire year, and actually explain my worth as a human being. And I don't think that is the right thing to do. Pay equity is something that is a right that all women should have access to. Now, despite these strides, challenges remain, and we all know it. It is heartbreaking to see the increased polarization and, in some cases, the rollback of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in various sectors and even parts of the world. And it's unfortunate that something as basic as ensuring everyone has a fair shot at success is being politicized. We are seeing right-wing politicians in the United States and even here in Canada attack the idea that diversity, including empowering women, makes our society stronger. And at the end of the day, I believe that we all have a role to play, and we need to be vocal. We need to let businesses and politicians outside of myself know that programs like the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, and the $10 a day childcare is effective, and it's needed, and it's making a positive impact on society. And we can all do that by actively participating in our democracy and ensuring we fight with our votes and our voices so that we do not travel backwards in time and lose all the hard work and all the things that we've built together. So despite these threats on diversity and inclusion, our Knowledge Hub stands as a foundation. Diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice. So when policymakers understand the unique barriers faced by women from all walks of life, from all backgrounds and ages, it's really making an impact. When financial institutions revise their lending practices to be more inclusive, that's the Knowledge Hub influence on making tangible change. So as we approach International Women's Day this week, we're reminded why this work is so critical. It's all of you in the room today that embody the spirit of this celebration, helping women businesses around Canada create jobs, strengthen our communities. You're not just building businesses, you are building futures. So to all of you here today who are working to make the business landscape more inclusive, thank you so very much. Your work is making a real difference for the businesses and for the families and the communities you support all across this beautiful country. Let's keep working together to build a strong economy, and let's continue to choose Canada. Thank you so much, everyone.
Well, it's hard to come after the minister. And we're so lucky to have a minister that's, she's so generous sharing her journey as an entrepreneur, like some of you. And I think it's the perfect representative, the government representative and minister for this portfolio. as she's been there. So now let's speak about research, because I think we have a report to launch. And we have Wendy in the room ready for the presentation to give us the key findings of this 2025 State of Women Entrepreneurship. So Wendy, please come and join me here.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm so impressed so many of you have come from all over the place on such short notice. I'm really glad the minister acknowledged the very large team that put together the report. That we're releasing the executive summary today, but we will release the full report within a couple of weeks, because I think it's important in the current environment to reinforce the evidence, right? And a lot of what the minister said about the role of women in the economy, the role of women in advancing sustainability, and the need to invest in women because it pays off in multiple ways, are messages that we're really reinforcing with the evidence and the data. And I feel like, in addition to starting our meetings with land acknowledgements, we should start with a rendition of "O Canada," because we are in a really difficult and challenging time. And I just wanted to sort of echo the minister's call for working together. We've done it before. Think about COVID. Canada, and women entrepreneurs in particular, struggled terribly during COVID, but we saw government, financial institutions, businesses, and organizations across the country, including many in this room, pull together and do things in a matter of weeks that would normally have taken years and years. And I think if we can remember the resilience and the progress that we were able to make in spite of COVID, it's a really important message that we have to share and hang on to. The other thing that I really wanted to stress before I get into some of the details is we know that targeted investments in women are important. We know that targeted investments in Indigenous entrepreneurs are important. We know that targeted investments in Black entrepreneurs are important, and in the 2S LGBTQ+ community, and so on and so on. But our sort of mission and focus is to erode the barriers that exist across the ecosystem so that women have equal access to opportunities, because there's way more money in our innovation funds, our supports for small business, and so on, than there is in the specific targeted pockets. So I'm going to really try to reinforce some of the findings this year and how they relate to really creating a inclusive ecosystem. We know, for instance, lots of organizations have set up funds and put women in the name, but many of those same organizations only provide 2 or 3% of their overall resources to women entrepreneurs, and that has to stop. We really need to hold organizations accountable and make sure that their gestures towards women are not just performative. And I think we are making progress. So I wanted to start, most of you know about the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy and the fact that it has different pillars, including investments in venture capital, the Women Ecosystem Fund, which supports, how many organizations in the room are supported by the Ecosystem Fund? A number of you are here today, WEKH and others. And those organizations, in turn, support women entrepreneurs. And then, of course, we have the VC Fund and the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub. So I'm not going to go through this in detail because you can get access to the executive summary, and we will share the PowerPoint slides after the event. But I wanted to underscore a few things. Small, medium enterprises are the backbone of the economy. And this is an issue that really needs to be addressed across government. It's not just about supporting women entrepreneurs, it's about supporting entrepreneurs, period, because so much of our economic and industrial policy is very much focused on large corporations, yet large corporations only account for 10% of jobs in Canada compared to 50% in the US. And that's the message that we have to deliver over and over and over again to level the playing field. We also know that the demographic shifts are here, and I don't care what people say about wokeness or EDI or political correctness. The fact of the matter is that if we do not have strategies that are truly inclusive, we are losing out on talent, we are losing out on markets, we are losing out on innovation and expertise, end of story. And we have to I'll just share a small point. We heard a lot of screaming about immigrants. Immigrants are driving up housing prices. Immigrants are stealing jobs. Immigrants are this and that. At the same time that the World Economic Forum said there are 5 strategies to address the global housing crisis. Number 2 was relaxing immigration. Why? Because immigrants build the houses. Immigrants built the railroad that was the foundation of Canada. And there's a lot of distortions that are being deliberately fueled, frankly, by external voices, but echoed through Canada, that are simply untrue and counterproductive. Our population is aging. I'm a perfect example. And we need immigrants. We need everybody pulling together, or we will not survive as a nation. And so those points are really important, and all of you know we bring an intersectional lens to the work that we do. As I am now an older woman, I also wanted to note that one of the recurrent messages that we've heard is there's lots of support for young entrepreneurs. There's not enough for older women. And yet people my vintage are often starting another career or their business, and they can't be left behind. We also know that a number of older women entrepreneurs with successful businesses are exiting. And so we need transition strategies. So the age dimensions of entrepreneurship really need to be considered as well. We know that the ecosystem is much stronger today than it was when we started, without question, but we also know there continues to be duplication, fragmentation, courses on introduction to entrepreneurship that are not coordinated. We still see communities where someone can go through one incubator and then they don't know where to go next. So there's still a lot of work to be done to ensure that the whole is more than the sum of the parts. Technological transformations. Generative AI took over the world since last we talked, basically. It's a massive opportunity for entrepreneurs in a variety of ways, and I've done a couple of workshops recently on this. What's really interesting about generative AI is the gender gap is reduced compared to other technologies. And in fact, generative AI is the English major's revenge, right? You don't need to be a coder. You do not need to be a coder. You do not need to be a coder to harness the power of AI, and we really need to double down on adoption of technology and make sure that women entrepreneurs are part of the discussion. And I'll talk more a bit about that. Obviously, Canada-US relations, big issue. The backlash is also an issue. And the housing crisis does have ripple effects on entrepreneurs because it makes space particularly expensive in some places, and so on and so on. So there's no question we have challenges. And I'm not going to talk a lot about trade and tariffs because I know the panel that we've added to the program will address some of these issues, but certainly recent research from BDC underscores that a lot of women entrepreneurs think that tariffs will have a negative impact on their businesses, partly because many women entrepreneurs export to the US, but also they get raw materials and supplies from the US as well, so it's going to cut both ways. The good news is we have a lot of other free trade agreements, and we have an amazing resource in that so many people in Canada were born in other countries. How many people in the room either were born outside of Canada or had a parent who was born outside of Canada? Okay? That is our secret weapon. That is our secret weapon. That is our secret weapon in countering US tariffs, is we've really got to leverage, and I think Susan Baca and some of the WEKH people may be in the room who can help with those processes. So we really need to double down on some of these assets that we have. We're doing a lot of work in the Diversity Institute through the Future Skills Center on AI transformation, and I just want to make one point on this. Canada, Geoffrey Hinton won a Nobel Prize, okay? But Canada is a laggard in the adoption of AI. So we design and develop great stuff, and we don't use it. And so government strategies around AI have to be really laser focused on supporting the adoption of AI across sectors. And that means everyone, how many people in the room are currently active users of AI tools? Yay. We can do more. So some of the key findings. Despite everything, women are an increasing percentage of business owners in this country and an increasing proportion of small business owners. Women are about the same percentage of self-employed Canadians as they were previously, but what this tells us is that women entrepreneurs are here to stay. And yet, as the minister mentioned, there's still barriers in terms of access to funding. And so we've got lots of data that shows in some detail the shifts, and you can see they're quite significant. Not just in terms of majority-owned women, but we're seeing, at least since 2020, an increase in equally owned businesses. We're also seeing women owning more larger SMEs, okay? Which is really, really important because it shows, everybody talks about Canada having lots of startups and not scale-ups. And what we're seeing, look at that black section and the green section. What we're seeing is the proportion of women owning larger businesses is increasing. We're also seeing women gaining ground in non-traditional sectors, right? And remember when we started, we talked a lot about how women are concentrated in service industries, retail, and so on. And that comes with certain disadvantages. Women are now gaining ground in other sectors, including things like construction, which is really encouraging from my perspective. When we look at innovation and exports, again, women are holding their own and we're seeing increases. And I wanted to draw some attention to this because, you know, the intersectional perspective is so important, as are some of those specialized programs. Look at the percentage of Indigenous, majority women-owned businesses in the Indigenous communities. That's a big increase since 2017. Racialized people, it looks flat, but part of that is because Black entrepreneurs are now counted separately, right? And I have a lot to say about that in a moment. Almost 40% of Black entrepreneurs in this country are women. And I would say that has a lot to do with the work of many people in the room. You know, the Boss Women program, the Rise Up program, the Base Cell program, the WTEL program, Decidulous Women. We talk about intersectional barriers. They are absolutely real. But intersectional supports can produce results, and that is what the data is showing us. Look at this. The percentage of Black-owned businesses by women has increased from 33% to 38% in a matter of 3 years. That's significant. And one of the things we really doubled down on, partly because of the context and the backlash, is trying to really quantify the impact of women entrepreneurs. And I apologize because the data that we've got so far from Stats Canada only goes to 2020. We're going to have new data. We'll be able to look at changes. But in 2020, women accounted for almost $90 billion in this country. That is a substantial economic contribution and a huge ROI when you think of the investments. Look at the number of jobs. Look at the number of jobs that were created. Almost 1 million jobs are with majority-owned, women-led SMEs. And we can see we're the blue, we're not the pink, just in principle. But you can see our percentage of jobs has steadily increased in recent years despite COVID. That's significant. And that's something any government should be concerned about at any level. And same thing with sales revenues. The guys are coming down, and we is going up. We're also trying to track things like unicorns and, you know, high growth organizations, and we're doing more research on trying to basically reverse engineer those stories, right? So what was it that helped them become so successful? And we're also looking at international comparisons. Canada is a leader in this space among industrialized countries. Not compared to all countries. Nigeria has a much higher percentage of women entrepreneurs than we do, for example. But among industrialized countries, we do very well. And the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor shows that we not only do well with respect to the gap between men and women, but we do well with respect to the level of entrepreneurship we see around the world. It's about twice the global average. And these are, you know, this is complicated stuff you can have a look at. But what we're seeing is women's level of entrepreneurship activity, so look at the blue line in Canada, is higher than most other countries in the world. And similarly, we see that women in Canada are steadily growing in terms of the established businesses. So not just entrepreneurial intent, but established businesses. And back to what Sabine talked about with the See It, Be It campaign and the work that everyone in this room does, I would argue, and I think this is especially true with Black entrepreneurs, I don't know if it's true with Indigenous entrepreneurs, but telling the stories of success is having an impact on people thinking about entrepreneurial possibilities. I would argue the supports are important, but if you can't see it, you can't be it. And telling the stories of successful women entrepreneurs is inspiring a whole generation. We've also moved forward on some of the evaluations and looking specifically at the WEST funding and what that's done. And we've had responses now from about 1,000 participants that show that many, as a result, secured new funding or got access to government funding. Many introduced new innovations, and many set new sustainable development goals. Not as good as Corrales, but where 100% of the ventures have sustainable development goals, but we are seeing movement across the ecosystem. We've also started to do program evaluations in terms of what works for whom, and Tanya is here with Ruth, who will talk more about the Inclusive Growth Project. Corrales has some of the best data that I've seen in terms of looking at impacts, as well as Evol and Capital Skills and ITAC. I think Sonia Gracia is here, who did some work with the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada and looked at the impact of supports and barriers to Indigenous women in the North in tourism, and so on and so forth. And the reason we're doing this work at a granular level is so we can really dig into what works for whom. Because our argument is when you're trying to support entrepreneurs, you need to think about their stage of development. There's no point in sending someone to a VC who is not investment ready. And we don't do a good job, I would argue, in assessing where people are in their journey. We have to take into account different sectors, and we have to take into account demographics, age, race, lived experience, and so on. And so what we're really trying to do is develop more frameworks that take into account all of those factors, stage of development, sector, and so on. And one of the things that the Future Skills Center has helped us do is start to develop a competency framework so anyone who is running an entrepreneurship program will have some common outcomes that they're looking at, as well as ways of linking together the programs that are really focused on ideation and confidence building versus the programs that are really focused on getting people significant investments. And those things are really important. So in terms of moving forward, you've seen this before, we're really preoccupied with this notion of inclusion across the ecosystem, right? Lobbying financial institutions as hard as we can to support the Investing in Women Code, which is being promoted around the world now, and I think there are 30 countries that have signed on to it, not Canada yet. And all it is transparency. It doesn't set quotas for investing in women. It just makes them tell us, in addition to that, few $1 million they've set aside for women and publicized in their social media campaigns, how much are they actually investing across their business? And the same is true with large corporations and their procurement. We need to know, how much are you buying from women? And in the current environment, that's going to be absolutely key. So, when we think about the societal level, I've already talked about a lot of this. We have to think about overall policy and program and making sure we bring a gender and diversity lens to every aspect of it. We need to think about how organizations are developing programs, including government agencies. I have stories I won't tell, not in this big an audience, but we need to do better at making sure that all government programs at every level bring a gender and diversity lens to the design. Because if you design a program and you say to be eligible you need $500,000 a year in revenue, how many women in the room are there? Right? And it doesn't mean that you can't design programs for companies with $500,000 in revenue, but you better understand that if you do that, you're excluding women, you're excluding most Black entrepreneurs, and so on and so forth. And we know that in Canada, more than half of businesses start with $5,000, and it's still pretty hard to get the $5,000. So we really need to think about that. AI, I'm very bullish on this. Everyone needs basic AI literacy. We need to better understand how it can meet business goals and objectives. And then, of course, we still need the PhDs. How many people remember this? 1991. Backlash is not new. Backlash means you're making progress and you're pissing people off. And we saw this with all the civil rights movements and so on. So we really need to hang on to the bigger picture and the long-term goals. And we need to challenge the crap that is spewing over our border about equity, diversity, and inclusion, because it is the only thing that makes good business sense in the current environment. And I don't know if anyone from the 51 is here, but I love that. I love that branding, right? Because women are 51% of the population. So I want to just underscore, we're the 51, we're not the 51st. So thanks very much. And as the panel joins me up on stage, I just wanted to make one other point, because in the current environment, we can't afford to be silent. So how many people in the room know who their member of parliament is, regardless of what kind they are? And how many people in the room have written to their member of parliament about the importance of women entrepreneurship and investments in women entrepreneurship? And how many people in the room have met with their member of parliament to say that they need to invest in women entrepreneurs? And how many people in the room have protested outside their member of parliament's office to complain that they're not investing enough in women entrepreneurs, right? In the current environment, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And we have to deliver these messages to politicians at every level and for every political stripe, because these are important messages, not just for women, but for Canada. So thank you very much. Ruth, Vicky. And apologies, I did go over time, but please come up. We've got Ruth Vachon, Vicky Saunders, Cassandra Dorrington, Shannon Peston, Alison Kirkland, and Magnolia Perron, who are going to tell you how it really is. The stairs are here for those of you with high heels or short legs. No, just. So just as we organized this event in a week and a half, we organized this panel between 11 o'clock last night and 7 o'clock this morning. So I want to start off by saying thank you very, very much to everybody for agreeing to share their insights, because, and we have lots more people in the room who would have lots to say, but we could only fit 6 chairs up here. So essentially, I'd just like to go through the list, through the group, and maybe in the spirit of the glass half full, you can introduce yourself and tell us about one thing that's happened in the last year that you think is really impactful and should be replicated and scaled. Vicky, why don't you start?
First of all, I'd just love to say, could we just give Wendy like a huge round for how amazingly badass you are? No, I'm very much enjoying Wendy Unplugged. All of you? Yeah. More Wendy, please. Hi, I'm Vicky from Corliss, and I'd like to shout out to that table of Corliss folks over there, and other activators that are here. Most impactful thing from this year We've been around for about a decade. It's our 10th anniversary. We used to be called CEO, if people are not aware of Corliss. And one of the things that we've changed is we've been always trying to figure out how to organize ourselves better so people can find the others in the community to accelerate each other's work. And we've gotten to enough scale now where we created this new structure called pods, so groups of 5 to 8 people who are working on similar kinds of things in the world, trying to transform different things. And it's like putting up a bat signal. I'd like to find all the people that are doing like regenerative agriculture, and then people pop from around the world and go, oh, I'm working on that. And they're like, really? So I have people from 6 different countries working in my group on this, or people that are in my neighborhood that I didn't even know were in the community. So we found a way to organize in small groups so that you can share what you're learning, because one of the things that we're seeing is really hard right now is like, you're noticing a certain thing, but other people are noticing different things depending on how you're tackling issues from a bunch of different angles. And when you get to share like what's working, we all know what's not working, but like what's working, it gets really exciting. And so we're seeing a bit more acceleration from that. So anyone who's doing community-based stuff and getting people curated into groups of like activities, I think this is like, it's working well for us anyway.
Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm Alison Kirkland. I'm the CEO of the Women's Enterprise Organizations of Canada. We'll just call it WEKH for the rest of the day. And we are part of the Women Entrepreneurship Loan Fund. And what we did when we implemented this fund was to do things differently. And we wanted to make sure that women who couldn't access capital in other ways could access loan funds to start or grow their businesses. And so we don't base our decisions exclusively on collateral or credit score. We look at the woman entrepreneur in her entirety to understand what the challenges are. And so I was just running some numbers last week and realized that 56% of our clients would not have been able to access loans because of their credit scores, either because they don't have one or because they have a low one. And so we want to make sure that women can continue to access capital and look at the woman, the viability of the business, the woman's story, and and we encourage everybody, all the banks, et cetera, to do that. And so we're continue to run the numbers, and we're going to be sharing that information with others to show that it's not the way to make a decision.
Thank you so much. And, you know, just shout out for Alison, because one of the things that has come out, and it was actually Shannon, I think, who raised it, is the 5 C's. I can never remember them all, but it's credit, capital, collateral, character, what is that? And something else, context, I don't know, conditions. When you really unpack them, they often have embedded bias because they're principles that were based on historical data, which was primarily based on men in technology, manufacturing, and so on. And so if you don't challenge some of those traditional assumptions, as WEKH is doing, and I think FACE is doing as well with respect to Black entrepreneurs, then we will not get where we need to go.
Thank you. I'm part of WEKH too, so I'm glad for that. I'm Ruth Vachon, for the one that don't know me. I'm from the RFAQ in Quebec. And I can say that for the last year, we've been quite busy. And I could raise, Wendy, I could raise my hand because I yell everywhere how much women needs everything. As much as in the government for the last month, I have 3 or 4 different meetings with the government every week because I think that it's so important. I feel that we are in emergency moment. So we have to do something now or it's going to be very late. And I have just a little story because when 3 years ago when we got the support from I said, okay, what I had in mind, I am privileged to have a very, very good address book. And I said, it doesn't make sense that it stays in your mind because it has to be shared with all the women. So we decided to build Maya, which is the platform we did last year. to be able to make sure that women can meet a large corporation on a platform in order to get contract. And it is something that it's very powerful. So now we have somebody full-time just bringing the RFPs on the platform, and we have more and more women every day. And if you're not there yet, I mean, after the conference, I invite you to be there. And what I realized that with the circumstance, it becomes so important because with WEKH, we got agree about 2 or 3 weeks ago that all the database will be shared with Maya. So I don't know if you can understand the difference that it's going to make, but it's going to be such a huge difference. So instead of having 100 large corporations on the platform, which is going to be very fine, well, we don't know the condition with the US yet, but at the end, in a year from now, we're going to have more than 20,000 women entrepreneurs on the platform, and it's going to be a very good place for them to do business together. So we're putting everything in place to make things happen in the next year, and we're very proud of that. Thank you, WEKH.
And just to underscore, access to financing, of course, is really important. But what I love about Ruth's work is it focuses on access to customers, right? Which is even more powerful, and that's a good segue to you, Cassandra.
Good morning, one and all. My name is Cassandra Dorrington, and I run what is known as CAMSI, Canadian Aboriginal Minority Supplier Council. What we do is we're a connector. So we identify and certify 51% owned, managed, controlled, racialized, which include Black, as well as Indigenous, and connect them up into corporate Canada and beyond. So we've been doing this work now for 21, we're in our 21st year. And so with where we are right now impacts me on a daily basis. Well, we have been, but before this whole threat started and the whole sort of pushback in DEI, we've been taking our entrepreneurs, both male, female, as I said, racialized, Indigenous, and we've been connecting them up in corporate Canada. And we've been identifying sort of how we get them in front of the decision makers so that they can be seen and they can bring their value proposition to the table. That's been vital because usually the biggest deterrent for entrepreneurs is I don't know anybody in that decision-making circle. How do I get in there? So we've been able to open the door to get them in. But in the last couple of years, what we've actually started doing is we recognize that our entrepreneurs derive their strength from communities. So we've been, whether we're going to Nova Scotia, we get communities of entrepreneurs together who start to work together. Because it's important for entrepreneurs to do work together, build their capacity before they even get in front of corporations. So that community work has worked really well for us. It's also worked on the corporate side, because corporates tend to share suppliers back and forth. I know a great supplier, or I've met a great supplier, but not good for me, but maybe good for you. So that community has worked on both sides. So we've been playing that very well in Canadian landscape. But last year as well, what we started is we wanted to take our entrepreneurs who are ready to go beyond their borders, outside of their comfort zone. So we started the missions to take them. And granted, we had started in the US because that used to be an easy place to go. But we also actually started taking them to the UK, taking them to Australia, taking them to New Zealand, where the climate was such that they were interested in partnering with these diverse suppliers. And so that has created confidence in our suppliers. It's also created opportunities and start to build relationships. So when this mess has started, and I'll use the term mess, I suppose that's something more derogatory. When this mess has started, it now says we actually have a platform that we're actually taking our entrepreneurs into other territories. Because I anticipate at some point this too will pass. We've lived through the recession, we lived through COVID, this too will pass. But we'll have built strong, resilient entrepreneurs who have global experience and are all ready to take on what's left in North America that go forward. So our two things, trade missions in the community. Okay?
And Cassandra represents CAMSI, but Stephanie Fontaine's here from WeConnect, and is there someone here from WeBe as well? So there are a number of supplier diversity organizations which deal with...
There's 6 in Canada for sure. IWSCC, Persons with Disability and Veterans, CGLCC for LGBT community, CCIB, who does Indigenous, WEBE Canada, We Connect International, and CAMC, 6.
There you go. There you go. But again, procurement is a superpower. Shannon.
Hi, Wendy. I don't know what hat I'm wearing today. I know many of you know me in the ecosystem as somebody who wears a lot of different hats, but I have had the privilege of working with the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub since it launched, and my role at WEKH has changed sometimes by the month, but by the day. But my background is in financial services and coming out of the banking sector and looking at women's banking strategies. And so that's the world that I come from. I'm not an academic, but I think when I look at the research today, I really see how industry is also informing research in a new way, and research is able to inform industry. So I think that that's a huge win. You kind of challenged us to be a little bit disruptive, and if you're not pissing people off, you're not doing a good job. And I think a bone that I have been what's the when you bone to pick has been around this idea of financial literacy for women entrepreneurs, and it is something that grates on me significantly. Because what we're looking at when we're talking about financial literacy in the mainstream sense is not working for our women entrepreneurs. And it takes a very colonial perspective, it takes a patriarchal perspective. And so when we're bringing these conventions, we're already telling women how to run their businesses in ways that are very counterintuitive to the way that they run their businesses. So I also have a company that's called The Finance Cafe, and I'm looking around the room today. We have a podcast, as the minister was kind enough to showcase, but the way that we're trying to change financial literacy is first calling it financial wellness, and secondly, helping women to embrace a lifelong journey with financial wellness, and recognizing that for many women entrepreneurs, our businesses are a pathway to economic self-sufficiency. A lot of women entrepreneurs are starting entrepreneurship out of necessity, not because they've got this great idea that they want to start. Maybe they're coming new to Canada, don't have the credit background that is required to go into a traditional bank, as an example. Maybe in Magnolia we'll speak about this too, but as an Indigenous women, the different barriers that we face, we can take a look at any intersecting identity and see where financial literacy is actually a hindrance, not an enabler. So one of the things that I'm really proud of is that we've had almost 2,000 women go through our program in the last couple of years, but we have been heavily supported by our ecosystem, which I think speaks so much to when we come together and try and solve for these problems together. WEKH has been a huge partner of ours, and but we've also been able to partner with government, with the financial sector, with civil society, and the big goal for us when we think about financial wellness is that we don't want to be the sole knowledge carriers. Our big goal would be to have Indigenous economic development folks in community who can implement an Indigenous feminist lens, for example, inside their community to meaningfully connect with their audiences. Or in Black communities, I was speaking with Nadine Spencer today to say, how can we engage more experts in financial wellness in our communities, so that there's not just the knowledge holders are a collective, right? And there's so much wisdom capital. So that's kind of the big goal where we want to be able to take this. But I just want to say too that over the past few years, seeing the strength of our ecosystem, and I think, if I could make an ask out of this group, is that it's so important that we collect the data. And even when we're sending out the surveys to try and understand what's happening, if we're not getting these stories and we can't be reporting on it inside our State of Women's Entrepreneurship Report, which we've heard is really important when it comes to policy development. So, I know there's survey fatigue, but, when we're thinking about how do we protect the work that we've done, we don't want to go backwards. So in protecting that is going to rely a lot on sharing knowledge so that we can make sure that it's going up.
Thanks so much.
Okay, hi everyone. My name's Magnolia Perron. I am from Tyendinaga Mohawk Territory. I'm really happy to be here today. I work for an organization called NACA, which is the National Aboriginal Capital Corporation Association. We're a national Indigenous organization. We're headquartered in Ottawa, and we have members across the country, which are Indigenous financial institutions. There's about 58 coast to coast to coast, and they work with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit entrepreneurs to provide them with developmental lending, advisory services, business grants, and so on and so forth. My role at the organization over the last couple of years has been leading our Indigenous women and youth programming. So we launched our Indigenous Women Entrepreneurship Program back in March of 2022 with some initial support under the WEKH Ecosystem Fund. So thank you for the research. Thank you for all the hard work your team is doing. It's great to see the impact that this strategy has had, and it really helps us with our advocacy efforts to ensure these programs continue. But over the last 3 years, we've had 30 of our member financial institutions sign on to deliver this program and hire Indigenous women where they can as business support officers to work with our clients in their respective regions. So we understand the importance of having, women with lived experience that can help women, establish their businesses or grow them. One of the things we've developed through our program, or that we've established, is a microloan fund. So we've been really focused on micro lending, and we've done about 8 million in loans over the last 3 years to Indigenous women entrepreneurs, which we're really proud of. Many of those women are sole proprietors. Many of them who have accessed the fund are startups. So now we're starting to think about, okay, we've got them the loan. Where do we go now? How do we ensure they're going to make it past that 3-year mark and create sustainable businesses? In terms of your question around some of what we've learned in the past year, a couple things. We've been bringing those business support officers together. We've arranged monthly just check-in calls for them to come together, share some of the concerns or challenges they're having, best practices. They're all doing very similar work across the country. So just fostering that community where they can come together and lean on and support one another. This August, we hosted our first gathering, national gathering for our Indigenous Women Entrepreneurship Program, which was incredible. We brought together about 120 Indigenous women. So I think, earlier we were talking about, the importance of these forums of bringing women together to share ideas, inspire one another. So that was a really, really positive event, and we hope to do more in the future. So those are some of the things we've been working on, some of the things we want to continue looking ahead at. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you. So, question to the audience. How many of you feel you will be your business or your organization will be directly affected by the tariffs? Okay, a few. And how many of you are concerned that your business will be indirectly affected by the tariffs? Everyone in the room should have their hand up, just saying. So I wanted to ask, and not everyone will necessarily want to answer this question, but I think for many of us, front of mind is what is the Canadian response going to be? And we've heard a bit, retaliatory tariffs are one part of the strategy. But hearkening back to the crisis we saw with COVID, I suspect we may see something on that magnitude. I think we really have to be prepared for large-scale economic disruption. And so the question is, what are we going to do to ensure that women entrepreneurs don't bear the brunt? Because remember, initially, COVID hit women entrepreneurs much harder than others. It hit Black entrepreneurs much harder than others because a lot of the relief programs were organized around lending and incorporated businesses with employees and left self-employed micro businesses behind. So what are we going to do? What are the priorities that we really need to focus on if we are expecting the worst. And I'm someone who always thinks we should hope for the best, but expect the worst and make sure we have plans in place to respond. And we're not talking months, we're talking minutes, weeks at most. So maybe Shannon, can you lead us off, and then others who want to jump in can add.
Yeah, I mean, a big question, and I'll just state I'm not an economist by any sense, but let's just kind of take what we learned from COVID. I think what makes us different is that COVID wasn't preventable.
Yeah.
And this is. And so we're in a situation now where it's sort of a war where nobody wins. It's like a whole bunch of guns going off, but no one wins.
A whole bunch of guys with guns.
A whole bunch of guys with guns, But everybody gets hurt in this, and that's the hard part, and that it could have been prevented. The other tricky thing about this is that we don't know how long this is going to last, right? So it's really hard. You want it when you talk about plan for the worst. So maybe let me just talk about, as an ecosystem, some of the things that we can be doing to support. One, we need to really be proud and protect our territory, protecting Canadian women-owned businesses and supporting Canadian women-owned businesses, and also recognizing that it's supporting Indigenous women-owned businesses, Black-owned businesses as well, because this is, like COVID, is going to hit differently to different groups. I think we're going to have to see some call for potentially support funds like we saw in COVID. And again, you just sort of said, like, making sure that those conditions are right. I think back to early days in the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy and the lobbying and the advocacy that went into, how do we advise government on what is needed? Nobody knows that better than the people that are in this room who are supporting entrepreneurs on a daily basis. Where the challenges are going to be is, first of all, we're dealing with a couple of things at the same time, right? We're dealing with a potential rollback in DEI, like that. We're already feeling that. So if that wasn't already driving this, now we have this additional pressure of the tariffs. And we know that the U.S. is our biggest trading partner, and we've got a lot of women who are exporting to the U.S. And Cassandra, you said it earlier, it was an easy market at some point in time. So women entrepreneurs are going to be really thinking about access to financial capital. So those developmental loans, relief loans, although they're a double-edged sword, but we might actually see some people who are going to go into really negative cash flow positions. But the question is, are these turnaround opportunities? There are going to be some businesses that are unfortunately going to close. That's the reality. We saw that during COVID as well. And I'm being the realist here. I don't want to sugarcoat this. I think another tricky thing is looking at different supply chains, and we have to start thinking about where we're sourcing from. But that's not always a quick fix, because it takes time to build relationships with those suppliers. It takes time to put terms in. Sometimes you're not even sure about the quality that you're getting, so there's uncertainty in that. And I think somebody said it on the news yesterday, it's sort of a cost and chaos challenge right now is what we're facing. And so costs are going to go up. Costs are going to get pushed on to our customers. We're also dealing with the fact that our Canadian dollar is weakening, right? So now we've got inflationary pressures that we need to be concerned about. But watching cash flow, if there is one thing that we really need to be paying attention to for the women clients that we are looking for, is helping them understand their cash flow and their cash flow projections. This is an area, so we know on a good day, 85% of businesses are going to fail because of poor cash flow management. So if that's on a good day, that pressure is even greater now. So those organizations that are supporting through loans, get the cash flow statements, help entrepreneurs understand where their cash is coming in, how much cash is going out, trying to encourage savings where we can. People are feeling it. Women are really scared about, what does this mean for my business? And so, and on the other side of this, if that's just not the day-to-day management of the business, I was looking at the report yesterday, and we still know that women are overrepresented still in travel and tourism. We still know that, so when we think about where this is going to impact, discretionary funding is going to be a big part. So consumer behaviors now. So we're going to see a decrease in tourism. We're going to see a decrease in things like bars and restaurants. We're going to see a decrease in apparel and in entertainment. And again, we think about women in tourism, we think about Indigenous women in tourism. So this is where you start to see the intersectionality come.
And I think you raise a really good point. Cash flow is one thing, but I also think scenario planning is another, because I feel, could be wrong, but I feel like right now people may be looking at my little business and saying, oh, I don't export to the US, I'm safe. Well, if 40% of the auto workers in Windsor become unemployed, the multiplier effects of that kind of disruption are going to be felt, even if what you do is run a restaurant or whatever. And so I do think we need to have a conversation about what ifs, because there is so much chaos and uncertainty. So what if this? What would the implications be if this, then that, and how are we going to prepare?
And just to add on to this too, another big thing that we need to watch out is the mental health considerations that are going, like we have been through 5 years of hell. We went through COVID, then we had to survive the postal strike. Now this, like it just feels like this has been never ending. And so the mental health considerations right now of the entrepreneurs, the risks that they're taking, and keeping in mind that entrepreneurs have put everything on the line for their businesses. So there is no plan B, there is no backup. So just being really mindful that conversation around the mental health, really watching for that in our customers is going to be important. So I'm really hoping to see that we think about mental health support right now and some relief support, and probably differently than what was done during COVID in terms of those programs and how the loans are being repaid.
Yeah, I think Ruth and then Cassandra wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I think she did. She should have done the conclusion, because it was about everything that she covered. But I think the mental health, at this point, I would say that I feel that it's very, very high. It's very something that we have to take care of, really. The tariff is something, but the DEI, I think that we just saw coming a few months ago, it will make a huge difference. You know, it's been 14 years that I've been working in that, and when we started, nobody knows what we're talking about. But they were saying, oh, okay, maybe it would be a good project to work on. I said, no, I'm sorry, it's not a project. It's the value that you raise with. Otherwise, I mean, it doesn't worth to be there. So now I think that we just see a split of these organizations that were doing that for as a project, as a money side, and in the others from the value side. So, and we have to work hard to find them very quickly, who's on the good side and who's not, because we don't have time to lose. So, and for the women, I mean, I feel that not everybody feels that they're concerned, but they are all. And we have, I think that what we think is, first we have to work on Canadian side. We have to work with the internal trade to make sure that it'll make happen. I mean, we have a lot of women on the service. Sometimes we say, well, it's bad because we would like to have them more diverse. But in this particular case, it's an ad for the women to be in a service, because they don't have as many barriers in between the provinces as if they're selling product, for example. So that's why we say that we're trying to target on these 20 or 30 or 40,000 women, that being together on the platform and being able to do business together, because I think that we have to think Canadian, and we're looking for the partners. We're not even looking for the same people. We're not targeting the same one. Targeting people that they're all across Canada. They're selling Canadian product. I mean, we're just trying to find people matching the values that we have in the moment, so to make sure that we can do quick and being efficient everywhere in the movement we're doing.
And Cassandra, you work with lots of multinationals, so why don't you jump in and tell us what you think?
Okay, first of all, I'd like to believe that while there is doom and gloom, there's always opportunity that comes out of this. And so I think we need to focus on what that looks like. The muscles we built during COVID are now, they're closer to the surface than they were. During COVID, I can still remember COVID, walking out on the street one day, there was no noise from the gardener. It was like, oh my God, I thought the world was ending. It was like the worst moment of my life. I stood out there and I said, is this what it's gonna look like? We built those muscles from that. We've come back from that. We actually got pretty cocky when we came back from that because everybody was like, oh my God, DEI is all in. But guess what? Civil rights and the work we were doing was around before DEI became the buzzword. And I remember when DEI came out, I was angry because we were doing great work and all of a sudden we got subsumed by DEI. And that became the nice diluted word for trying to make sure everybody got included. And what happened is we made that pool so big, it became overwhelming, so now the pushback is on that, okay? This world had got to have some sort of correction anyway. Now, granted, this is too big a correction, and we have to think through this. But the first thing we do, I love where you're at, identify the wellness of your business. Identify the value of your business. You have to start there because we got a little bit of treading water to do as we go through this. As I talk to my corporates, the Canadian corporates are saying, we're all in. But again, we don't know what that looks like yet. So therefore, be clear on what your value is. As you talked about changing supply chains, all the corporates in Canada are changing supply chains. They're all looking for something closer to home. So if you weren't purposely doing work with them, they need to find that. They need to de-risk their supply chain. So they're going to be looking for something internal. So keep that focus on. So your value, your supply chain. When I talked earlier about communities, you need to start partnering with people. You need to share some of this with each other because it's very lonely and very hard being a solo entrepreneur. Find someone in your area that's complementary that you can start to work with. As I said before, start going, it's harder to go further afoot beyond Canada depending on what your finances look like. It's really hard to do that. Some of my corporates in the US have said to me, all we're doing, Cassandra, is changing some of the wording. Like we're taking away the aspirational goals about what our board looks like, what our managers look like. But they also still don't know what that looks like. They're still wondering what's going to come down. So some of them aren't putting their head above the radar yet, right? So Stephanie and I had this discussion. Last year we had a major conference that we brought corporations together. And they were all excited. They're like, we'd love that all the suppliers under one roof. I'm glad we're not doing it this year because we'd have a whole bunch of suppliers and no corporates in the room. Because they are really wondering what this means and what they can actually do. I come back to corporations always buy value. I don't care what color value is. I don't care what gender value is. They look for value. So you have to make sure what you're bringing to the table is strong. Right now, that America First is real. I was just in New York last week. The reception was very lukewarm. And they're like, well, if you're partnered with an American and they're the lead, that will look good. So, and I had one of my other suppliers saying they were working with a national hospitality chain, and they've said, we've been told to buy American. And they're in Canada. That buy American is real. So you've got to start culling through your supply chain, seeing where you start to work. But I foresee we're still in the early stages. They really don't know. They really don't know what the penalties are going to be like and who's willing to stand up for that. I appreciate places like Costco, places like Apple, who are pushing back and said, this is part of what we do. We were doing this before this became the buzzword, and we're going to continue to do this. But not everybody has the deep pockets to take on the lawsuits that are coming. So you're going to have some who are not going to take your calls right now. It's important for you, as I said, to tread water, to find local supply chain people. If your pockets stay in Canada, Canada's what you're looking for. Because we've got to change our supply chain model, and we're not going to be going to the US for all that. And we can't create the lines to the UK, the European Union right away. So what they will be looking for is they will be looking for local. So again, this is a step-by-step. As we're doing more exploratory with our corporates to saying what's the feeling like now, where you're going now. But it's going to become unclear until we get it farther down the road.
Thanks. Vicki. I saw Vicki before I saw you.
Yeah. So I think Shannon's comments around it's going to, I would just say it already is. Like we are, I for the last year feel like there's a tsunami coming for small business before any of this happened. The conditions for how you create a business, how you build a business have completely changed. It costs about 40 cents on the dollar to acquire a new customer using these ads from the 5 companies that own all the pipes to access us through social networks. And there's no special sauce there. So like these new social networks that are starting up are very interesting. We're paying a lot of close attention to that. And it's my belief anyway, I'm with Wendy on this. I think there's like massive crashing coming everywhere. Like if you're walking around going, it's going to be okay, I do not think that's the case, which is why find your communities, get in touch with your customers. You need your customers' emails, not going through somebody else. How can you own your customers? How can you get access close? And then share in communities that you're in so that you're buying from each other. These kinds of things I think are incredibly important. And what we're doing, like at the beginning of this year, we started stabilization calls in Corliss, and we do them every week. So people can come and say, I'm stuck with this, here's a new thing that's happened, is anyone else experiencing this? How can we deal with this? A lot of it is just, I just need to be able to say this out loud, I'm worried, to people in a safe space, just to like share it with each other. So these stabilization calls, but we also had tariff calls when we thought we were gonna have tariffs a couple weeks ago. And a bunch of folks showed up and we're like, okay, we've done all this planning. If you're super overwhelmed, you go into Vicky's room. If you need some emotional support, you go to MJ's room. If you need some strategy, you go to Lauren's room. Okay, who's in group 1? Who's really overwhelmed? And like, no one put up their hand. I'm like, And then the next one, who else? Nope, no one needed emotional support. And we're like, why are you here? Oh, we just want to help anyone who needs that. And it was kind of a wild thing, but I was also worried, like, where are the people? That like I can feel this coming, right? But it's almost like there's some sort of delusion kind of floating around out there that it's probably okay. I'll just keep my head down and work harder. But I think this is the coalition building we need to do. We need to connect with each other and we need to share what we're seeing. So because if someone might just be 3 steps ahead of you and be seeing something that you're not seeing yet, you need to know that so you can plan. So that's how I'm feeling. But also if we do get into this larger crashing situation, one of the best things about Canada during COVID was those daily calls with the minister's office. And like, here's what happened overnight. And they were so responsive. So hopefully that reminder, hopefully people that are in government will be open to having those calls and like really paying attention, because that was a very beautiful communication process we had going.
Allison, sorry.
This is a great question, Wendy, and I think there's a couple of things just from a national perspective. And from WEKH, we work. Our mandate is to work with the organizations across the country that support women entrepreneurs. So don't forget that those organizations exist and tap into them, because they have the staff, the team, the skills. Our FAQ in Quebec, EVOL, every province has the supports. So I think number one, I think that's super important. Interprovincial trade, and Cassandra and I were talking about this, is that, we kind of have to move the dial on this and put the pressure on the politicians to bring down some of the barriers that exist within Canada and are preventing us from trading within our own country. So I think that that's, a very important movement that we need to keep pushing for. My economics background says it's also important that we also need the revenue by selling to other countries, so we can't forget our export and trade. And so as we're working interprovincially and building those skills and et cetera, we need to be also thinking about how we can go somewhere other than the States. And there's lots of markets that are really anxious for Canadian entrepreneurs, Canadian products, because they know the quality that comes from this country. And then to Shannon's point about financial and cash flow management, and I think that was one of the challenges we saw during COVID, was that, there were the relief loans and it was almost like an afterthought, oh, now I have to pay that back. So it's keeping that in mind and keeping that in your cash flow and paying attention to those things in order to stay ahead of the curve here.
Thanks. Magnolia.
Okay, maybe just to add a couple things, because there's a lot of great information. I think, lessons learned from COVID. Some of the best practices we saw from our members was, Vicky, you mentioned, like, where are those women that need the emotional support? And it's usually when you're not hearing from someone is when you need to reach out. So I guess for the folks who, work in the ecosystem, it's like, reaching out to your clients, reaching out to the entrepreneurs, checking in, having those calls, trying to get a sense of how they're doing and how you can support before everything kind of unfolds in the coming weeks. I also wanted to share for the entrepreneurs in the room. I know Startup Canada, and I know Kayla was here earlier. Oh, she's waving in the back. Everyone take a look. They've done, just to give them a shout out too, they've done a really great job at convening folks in the ecosystem to talk about the tariffs and just to hear from different organizations, different perspectives on what's going on. And then for the entrepreneurs, developing toolkits and resources that are available, online. I know they did a survey. A lot of the entrepreneurs that they surveyed are worried about the impacts of the tariffs and worried about, having to downsize or closures and things like that. And in their survey, in terms of what type of support they were looking for, it was of course, financial support in the forms of, grants, tax breaks, etc. I know for NACA, working with the Indigenous entrepreneurs in our network, we didn't see the emergency loan program for Indigenous entrepreneurs roll out until after it rolled out for mainstream entrepreneurs. So I'm sure that's something my organization will be very vocal about in the coming weeks. But also just access to information, like timely information about what's going on and how this is going to impact them. So I think as, the ecosystem, it's, our role to, as that information is, coming into our inboxes, sharing that out with our network, with our community, with our entrepreneurs, so people are informed. So maybe I'll leave it there. Thanks, Wendy.
No, thank you. So I think I'm getting the signal that we're almost out of time, and because we're broadcasting this, we do have to kind of stick to time. So I'll just give each of you a minute to add to anything else that we should really be prioritizing over the next year, either from the point of view of our organizations or as individuals. If you were to ask us to do one thing, what is it? And Vicki, you can start.
So I want to acknowledge Lorraine. Can you stand up for a sec? Lorraine has been running sustainability first programs with all of our entrepreneurs. And this has been a huge thing. It kind of comes to what you were saying, Shannon, around make sure you know your numbers and that you know what's going on. You need 5 times the revenue to accept a loan. So if you're going to go get a loan for $50K, you need $250K in revenue. Like very simple things like this that you need to be able to know. And so make sure you have a Lorraine in your world who's helping you to figure out how to get sustainable with your business.
Financing is always top of mind for me. So think about when it's time, do you need funds to make a strategic pivot, how you can do that. So it's the planning. So plan. And reach out for help. Go to the resources. They can guide you through those steps. So don't do it alone. Get the support because it's there.
I would say take care of you, take care of your people, and make sure that you work on your network every day to create better collaboration between all.
If being an entrepreneur was easy, everyone would be doing it, okay? So think about that. I want you to continue what COVID told us, its networks are important. Build your network. And the other thing I want you to do is if you're in business, you're always thinking opportunity. If you said I made pencils, that's all I'm doing, then you should be out of business. You're always thinking this is now your time to think opportunity.
Couldn't agree more about now's the time to assess the business and see where new opportunities are, where new customers might be able to come from. Again, one of the things we saw out of COVID is those who were able to move into a digital environment were able to accelerate and, in fact, grow their businesses. When you ask Wendy, what can we do? I would love to be able to see a rallying cry towards with the bigger financial institutions to support some of the developmental lenders and keeping that pipeline open, and maybe as companies are moving through some of the developmental lenders, how do we graduate them into bigger lending portfolios so that we can keep that loan fund open and helping more and more entrepreneurs. And Vicki, I appreciate the comment about, the revenues. It takes 5 times the revenues. My only caution with that is It's also more about the expenses because, you know, you can bring in all the revenues you want, but if your expenses are too high, you're not able to service that debt. So revenue is important, but that bottom line being what your profit is will tell you how much cash is actually available to cover loan payments.
Magnolia?
Hi, okay. It's so hard going last. So much good advice and recommendation. I mean, I guess just to summarize what was already shared, leverage your relationships, know your numbers as much as you can, lean on each other for support, and take care of yourself. I think, that well-being and mental health we talked about is so important, and we're an ecosystem for a reason. We're here to support you, so yeah, please reach out. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And I just wanted again to thank all of you for coming, because I do think that having these conversations and building community is really foundational. And they're just a couple of, I don't think I can summarize. I just wanted to add a couple of things that I've been thinking a lot about. One is there is an opportunity with government relief and supports to also anchor them in skills. Because remember during COVID, how we accelerated digitization? Remember that? Stuff everyone said, universities can't do online, take 100 years, poor quality, blah, blah, blah. Over a weekend, universities are suddenly delivering online. And I think there may be an opportunity to not just provide relief, but to invest in really strengthening our organizations for the next decade. So that's one thing I think is super important. I do think leveraging diversity. Canada has such a strong foundational Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms, and so on and so forth. And we may think they're imperfect, but our employment equity legislation's been around for almost 40 years, and it makes a difference. So when people say, oh, but Elon Musk says, what I say is we're Canadian and we're in a very different context in terms of our institutions. And regardless of whose political stripes may dominate, that is a really important thing to hang on to. I think the other thing that we all need to think about is not only our mental health, but, and Vicki sort of alluded to this, the people who aren't here and aren't necessarily speaking out. I spoke to an entrepreneur who happens to be trans and in Alberta, for example, earlier this week, and thinking about how she is feeling in this current environment. Even just making a phone call, checking in on people. Another lawyer who's head of EDI in a firm that just announced it's getting rid of its EDI programs in Canada, right? There are lots of people who are being affected by all these things, but I think we should all be really trying to keep our eyes open and looking for people who are worse off than we are, and to lift as we climb, because I think some of us have more privilege and more resources than others. And I think we really need to be proactive in sharing that. And as I said, everybody said, there are new markets out there. If we harness the power of our diversity, Africa is one of the fastest growing markets, right? Asia Pacific. The percentage of Japanese women entrepreneurs increased dramatically in the last year, and I think it's because of the attention that's been focused on Asia Pacific. If you're not from Japan, find a friend who is, because that local knowledge will make all the difference between being successful or not. And I think there are lots of innovative ways we can take advantage of the crisis that is coming to emerge stronger. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you'll spend the next half hour chatting with each other, and we will move forward. Thank you.